Welcome back to Mornings with Michael Murphy, where we look at hot topics in management psychology. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a very interesting show for you. We'll be discussing the recent Hasbro Interactive debacle and getting some advice from leading organizational psychologist experts. Joining me today in the studio is management expert Tracy Adams to give us more information on Hasbro Interactive. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Michael. Great to be here.
Great to have you here with us. So, Tracy, for those who are unfamiliar with Hasbro, tell us a little bit more about the company.
Hasbro is one of the largest toy companies in the world. In order to address demands for digital interactive games, Hasbro launched Hasbro Interactive in 1995. Alan Hassenfeld, the CEO of Hasbro, personally handpicked Tom Dusenberry to build a new division and begin the revival of digital interactive games. Early success for Hasbro Interactive stemmed from traditional games being given digital reboots. In 1997, they had a breakthrough with several games featuring in the industry top 10. In order to maintain this growth, Dusenberry elected to purchase additional companies, titles, and rights. To reach this new revenue projection, divisions within Hasbro Interactive were given high and risky budgets, which most fell short of. After this failure, Hassenfeld brought in Herb Baum, an experienced manager. Early in 1999, there was talk of a $1 billion revenue target for Hasbro Interactive. During this year, they burst their budget and had massive returns of unsold products. This led to executives losing confidence in Hasbro Interactive. However, Hassenfeld and Baum kept pushing on. Hasbro Interactive initiated a deal with Burger King through a monopoly promotion. However, Hasbro already had a similar deal existing with McDonald's. To deal with this lack of accountability, the newly appointed CFO, Al Verrecchia, pushed for more attention to be paid to Hasbro Interactive and their accountability. This led to the appointment of Jackie Daya, who projected that Hasbro Interactive was going to fall well short of their predicted outcomes. By the end of the year, Hasbro Interactive lost $74 million on a revenue of $237 million. From then on, Hasbro Interactive ran into multiple issues, from being unable to launch Games.com and not going public, to suffering more returns and job insecurities. In late 2000, Hasbro sold off Hasbro Interactive, and by 2001, more than a quarter of employees were laid off.
So they're in a little bit of trouble now, Tracy.
They certainly are, Michael.
Tell us a bit more about the leadership team.
Well, Dusenberry and Hassenfeld are both contributing to these problems. Based on the Big Five personality model, Hassenfeld exhibits a high level of agreeableness and openness to experience. He displays this personality type by putting too much trust and support in Dusenberry and having less control in the operations of Hasbro Interactive. Dusenberry, however, displays a low level of conscientiousness and a high level of extroversion and open to experience through his leadership style being positive, assertive, and action-oriented. As Herb Baum said, he has great strength for bringing people together and motivating employees. This indicates that Dusenberry was an optimist, which was also seen with his overly ambitious business plan and unwillingness to report negative performance to his subordinates, which often led to strategic conflict between Hasbro and Hasbro Interactive. Withholding negative information from his employees created a work environment that was filled with decisions under an availability bias. An availability bias is a human cognitive bias that causes people to overestimate probabilities of events, relying on previous experience and memory. This decision-making process and availability bias was accounted for by the introduction of Jackie Daya to the team, where her high conscientiousness and high emotional stability led to her attempting to rein in Dusenberry and grounded his thought process with more rational decision-making.
Insightful comments. Thanks, Tracy. It's pretty clear that Hasbro Interactive has been facing some major issues. Now we're joined by our expert in business ethics, Professor Terry Bradshaw.
Hi Michael, thanks for having me.
So Terry, where did they all go wrong in regards to ethics and corporate governance?
During the lifetime of Hasbro Interactive, the executives pushed the ethical boundaries on multiple occasions, which damaged the company's image. In the pursuit of rapid growth, Tom Dusenberry boldly aspired to a $1 billion revenue target, which led to unethical and risky decision-making. This is a clear demonstration of the cognitive bias over confidence, which is seen when people are so confident about their own opinions and knowledge that they ignore risks. In giving Tom so much autonomy, the executives failed in their duty to put a stop to unrealistic and, in the long term, damaging goals. There are other warning signs for Hasbro. Executives drew such fine lines between whether expenditure was an expense or investment purposes which would see a return. By making expenses look like assets, Hasbro executives neglected their responsibility to act in the best interests of Hasbro. They claimed they were making investments for the good of the company's future, whilst they were actually being financially irresponsible. Hasbro Interactive has also shown little regard for the well-being of their employees. The promise of stock options, which was later broken, demonstrated the inability to fulfill the required duty of care to Hasbro Interactive employees. This is the pinnacle of poor ethical management. There is no evidence to suggest that these employees were compensated for this broken promise. Hasbro Interactive should not have been offering shares to their employees when there is no guarantee that they would eventuate. Also, in order to keep their best interests at heart, Hasbro Interactive management should have been more transparent about their position financially with employees. It is sometimes forgotten that employees can be the most important and powerful stakeholder.
In your professional opinion, what would you do to rectify this situation?
Well, Bruce, first and foremost, Hasbro Interactive has to start acting with Hasbro's interest in mind. Arguably the most important executive responsibility is that of the company's economic well-being and legal compliance. It is the CEO and the board objective to ensure that the best interests of the stakeholders, including shareholders, in mind when making decisions that affect the company. At the moment, Hasbro Interactive is being run with the best interests of the president, Tom Dusenberry. His overconfidence needs to be reined in. Dusenberry was given too much autonomy with little to no corporate governance. This allowed for decisions to be made without any checks done by the parent company. If I was on the board of Hasbro, I would be calling for the implementation of a system whereby every single person within the company becomes accountable for his or her own actions, including the director. An entirely new system of corporate governance needs to be implemented by an independent consultant to ensure all staff know his or her own role and responsibility within the organisation. The executives need to be aware of cognitive biases such as overconfidence and create a structure where there are parameters and boundaries. A new system will be able to ensure that all major decisions made by Hasbro Interactive are approved by Hasbro senior management. This complete overhaul should hopefully create a substantial cultural shift away from the current consequence-free decision-making towards a more accountable and economically viable decision-making process. Hasbro could utilize the SMART goal system, standing for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. SMART goal setting would have prevented the unrealistic expectations that ultimately led to risky behavior. Hasbro Interactive management should also be more transparent about their position financially with employees, and this is where communication comes in.
Well, it certainly looks like they have their work cut out for them, Terry. Thank you for providing your expertise on the issue.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you for listening.
Well, we can see that Hasbro Interactive has had some ethical mishaps, but could communications be the crux of it all? We're joined now by organisational communication consultant Marie Sanders.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good, thanks, Marie. It's great to have you here to provide some guidance on this topic. Where do you think they all went wrong?
Look, I think there are a few problems to do with the communication that contributed to Hasbro Interactive's downfall and their source of conflict. The communication within Hasbro Interactive itself, with Dusenberry making all the operational decisions, including those relating to organisational structure and partnership agreements, as well as the lack of communication between Hasbro and Hasbro Interactive. Every manager knows that effective two-way communication is a critical part of any organisation and is required for organisational change, structure, and employee productivity and morale. But examining this particular case, Hasbro Interactive did not have an effective formalised communication and organisational structure in place. All the communication was done in-house and through an arbitrary operational decision-making approach, with all the decisions being made through Dusenberry. This decentralised communication system naturally led to a misalignment of goals and forecasts and led to an ineffective reporting structure with different levels of reporting within the organisation and minimal accountability within those operations. Dusenberry's focus on autonomy at the expense of effective communication meant that there were several times Hasbro was left questioning between the promise and the delivery of results. This was highlighted by the large number of product returns in 1998 and the 1999 loss of $74 million in revenues from the previous year. In 2010, research done by Van Buren and his team identified that a lack of formal communication structure and poor communication can have a demotivating effect and a poorer productivity from employees. There was also a lack of consultation with the licensing management and Hasbro personnel. The employees would have felt so confused and alienated because the senior managers weren't supporting them, so this could have been avoided if communication was more effective with a two-way feedback approach. Poor communication has the potential to undermine organisational decision-making as it prohibits collaboration and prevents organisations from capitalising on the creative potential of a diverse workforce. There was no strict control of Hasbro to Hasbro Interactive, with a complete lack of communication between the two units. Communication was not encouraged or implemented, which obviously led to poor decision making. Hasbro Interactive did not consult with Hasbro or the acquisition companies because Hasbro believed they knew what was going on with the brand. These problems created barriers to Hasbro Interactive. They just followed Hasbro's annual planning and review cycle without any collaboration from other divisions, which led to a sense of segregation between the divisions and a poor business plan structure. An example I noticed was when Hasbro Interactive initiated the monopoly promotion with Burger King, even though Hasbro has the same agreement with McDonald's. This was because there was no coordination between Hasbro and Hasbro Interactive licensing divisions when managing those licensing properties.
It's pretty clear that you think these issues need to be addressed before they can move forward.
Oh, 100%. These issues are going to be fatal for this organisation.
If you were the CEO of Hasbro Interactive, what steps would you be taking to turn the company around?
Organisational communication is absolutely vital to the process of ensuring that people and their work are meeting organisational objectives. In order to facilitate internal communication, I would suggest that they first create some formal communication channels. Hasbro should implement an online team briefing system company-wide to be contributed to by each department. The value of a team briefing system is that it ensures all employees understand what each team and division are working on and why. This database would effectively prevent the recent Macca's incident from occurring. If there'd been a protocol to check the team briefing system for existing promotions before creating new ones, this would have been completely avoided. The database could include an inquiry directory whereby employees could access the contact details for the manager or leader of various projects. This would make communication between Hasbro and Hasbro Interactive much simpler. If you can quickly check who you need to speak to, then communication becomes naturally easier. Additionally to the team briefing system, I would also suggest more meetings to be held between Hasbro and Hasbro Interactive in order to create another communication channel. Meetings should be scheduled on a minimum of a monthly basis and should be used to communicate the different plans for each management team. Setting up channels is essential for the transmission of information about various aspects and projects within the organisation and to promote synchronisation and problem solving company-wide. And Hasbro would benefit from knowing what was going on at Hasbro Interactive to make sure it was aligned with their overall goals. This communication can't just be at a management level though. We need to see a two-way dialogue between employees and management. Creating a culture of open communication enhances trust between members, which is going to be especially important after the broken promise of shares to employees. Managers should be encouraging open communication in meetings and even designating a devil's advocate in order to give permission to questioning authority. Having a devil's advocate helps avoid groupthink, so employees aren't just jumping on the bandwagon without giving their own opinions. Training on communication could also be an option if employees have difficulty with this culture change in order to more effectively support them. Finally, I would also seek to incentivise communicative behaviours and information seeking in employees by incorporating these behaviours into their performance management criteria. This way, employees can clearly see the desired behaviours of the organisation and are rewarded when they display them, encouraging organisational communication.
Tracy, these sound like huge changes. What's your opinion?
You're absolutely right, Michael. These are going to be big changes. Organisational change efforts are prone to failure, so management are going to need to communicate clearly with employees to ensure mutual understanding of the need for change.
Well, Hasbro Interactive definitely needs to make some changes in order to get themselves back up and running. Let's just hope it's not too late to turn around. Thank you to our experts for giving us some more information and providing their analysis of Hasbro's major issues.
No worries, Michael.
Thanks for inviting us.
Next week, we look at the psychology of health and safety. Until next time, you've been listening to Mornings with Michael Murphy.